Who can we troll today?
Let's play this smart for once, huh?
Your workforce is about to get bigger. Dwarf inbound.
Let's get the job done!
Looking forward to be
Loretta
working
needs
with.
maintenance! You're as good as new, Doretta!
Just one more. Dozer.
This canister is full! Gotta get it plugged back in. One fuel tank.
All canisters fueled. Drill dozers ready to make more progress. The drill dozer is en route to the Hearthstone. Expect heavy resistance. Swarm detected. Keep the drill dozer operational at all costs.
One section is ready to be filled. Sentry on!
crate here. Let's open it.
Watch and learn.
It's your freaking nature.
Attack the hologram skin. Sentry set. Get him, boy.
A new miner inbound. Roger that. Supplies are coming. Drill dozer just ran out of fuel again. Please refill it.
Look!
Restock.
Look there! Hey, it's a fossil! Platform! Enoch Pearl here. You want some more? Access provided. Need to get my pickaxe sharpened when we get back. Doretta, heal! Reloading!
Getting more ammo.
Canister, topped off! Ha! The dozer goes through oil shale like a grunt through a chicken coop.
Zip line done. Found some night.
The drill dozer is under attack.
Ready to use. Hey, it's one of those snail-looking fossils. That's focus fire. Reload!
some of the ammo.
Canister, ready for refuel.
Platforms, please.
Kill it before somebody gets hurt!
Well done. All canisters are loaded. The drill dozer is ready to move out.
Really much better. Great!
Getting supplies.
Drill dozer moving. Try to keep up and guard it with your life.
Come here.
Your tin ass over here and hurry, please. Get back. It's assembling.
Contact. Swarm approaching the drill dozer. Hunker down and load up.
Ready to hit them. Rock and roll! Sentry on.
The drill dozer has just suffered permanent damage. Keep that thing running at any cost.
Please, rescue me!
Oh, wow.
Hurry's up! Ready to use.
Bulldozer has reached the target. The Omeran Heartstone is jamming our readings, but we expect heavy pressure when the drilling commences. Nitro's been withdrawn and supply pod is inbound. Supply pod launched. Better stand back. Supply pod requisitioned. Launching now. Supplies are on the way.
Not ready. Flares recharging.
One sentry gun ready to be built.
Drill dozer fix!
Secondary objective completed. Now finish the job.
Ammo taken.
Bombing!
Zip line ready.
I'm in. Getting more ammo. Never felt better.
Get lined up.
Platform!
No ammo left. I'm taking some of the ammo.
Platform! Got no flares ready!
Extraction commencing. Drill dozer running at full steam. Stay alert, team. The noise and vibrations are attracting the bugs. We got an incoming swarm. Please remember that the drill dozer is top priority. Swarm! It's a big one, team.
Out of the way!
Dead!
The dozer's just broken through the crust of the Omeran.
Incoming rock strike! Loading box! I'm not scared of you! Sweet! Pull back the hell!
Swarm on the intercept course. Get ready to protect the drill dozer. We're 50% through, team. Drill dozer is still holding together. Contact! Lock and load!
Damn!
Grabbing ammo.
just has to drill a little further and we're done.
We need to take out the beavers.
Attention team, to keep the drill dozer running at full capacity, you need to keep it clear of bugs. Also, we got an incoming swarm. Swarm, they're here.
Get away from me!
The drill dozer served its purpose. The Heartstone is ours. Deposit it and wrap up the mission.
Reloading.
Dwarves don't die easily. Oh yeah.
Nicely done. Armor and Heartstone secured. Call the drop pod when you're ready. Your ride home is on the way. Drop pod inbound.
Hold on, suckers.
Drop pod has arrived. Retrieving the mule. Drop pod departing in T-minus 5 minutes.
Ready to be filled.
Here's something for you.
Drop departing in T-minus 4 minutes. Mule secured. Initiating launch sequence. Deep Rock Galactic thanks you for your good work. Drop pod will leave no all without you.
Oops.
Like that! Rocket!
Retrieving escape pod.
Did I hear a rocket?
You!
mission is ready, the pod is prepped. Get on board the drop pod.
That's the stuff. Cheers! Come on, boys. We're leaving. I needed that.
Time to get carried. Again.
We rock! Get ready to rumble! Rock and stone, everyone!
Let's get some spooky ambience going.
I'm too young to die!
Stop whining!
Okay, team, you've signed up for escort duty. Our target is an Omran Heartstone, and your job is to protect and maintain the drill dozer as it makes its way there. Get ready.
Stand right up.
Stand clear of the landing zone, team. Drill dozer coming in.
I don't want to hear about it, Bishop. She's alive. We're still talking.
19 minutes, this area is going to be a cloud of vapor the size of Nebraska.
Hicks, don't let him leave.
It's a mystery to me how all these men were fixed.
It was on the 40th floor, Ward C, of the Fieldcrest Home Medical High-Rise, where Hicks and Newt would reunite 13 years after escaping LV-426. The corporal's return to Earth began with several months in quarantine, waiting to be cleared into the general populace. Medtechs had tended to his wounds, though injuries sustained from the acidic blood expelled onto his face left him scarred and disfigured. Parts of his memory were erased, that is, whatever parts were involuntarily erased from the ensuing collapse into alcoholism. During his quarantine, there were no visitors. Pain, loneliness, and isolation followed Hicks in the years he was reinstated into active duty within the Corps. Former comrades, fearful he may somehow be infectious from the alien blood, avoided contact. The Acheron mission had left Hicks haunted, and he was riddled with guilt over those he couldn't save. I was one of the lucky few. Go Marines, by God. I keep remembering Acheron. Drake, Vasquez, even that ass Hudson. They were okay. Okay, well, they were buddies, and I let them all die. Drunk and disorderly conduct, brawling, public intoxication, all became habitual. A sterling record prior to the Acheron mission became tainted with repetitive infractions after his return, but there was still use for him. After being in holding after further misconduct, Hicks was released to receive a disc containing video footage of the Coast Guard probe ship, Dutton. The crew, on a routine mission to clear floaters from entering into Earth's atmosphere, encountered an abandoned cargo vessel, the Junket. Its pilot pod ejected, blood, bullets, and acid holes, and dead bodies were everywhere within the ship. The Coast Guard's protocol was to destroy such floaters, and Dutton's crew followed through, but the vacuum of the blast pulled in what they believed to be a parasite. The creature, unmistakably to Hicks as a xenomorph, broke through the Dutton's airlock, killing the crew before its own injuries expelled its acidic blood, breaching the hull, and resulting in the ship's destruction. Hicks observed, "The ship exploded, taking the alien son of a bitch with it. But proof of the one meant there were more. What was that old phrase? Where there's smoke, there's fire. Yeah, the fires of hell." I knew it was only a matter of time before it happened. That's why the Marines never kicked me out of the Corps. They knew it too. Hicks was ordered to meet with Colonel Stevens, accompanied by Dr. Arona, a geneticist and civilian advisor to the USCM, who had a particular interest in the xenomorph species. Arona, aware of Hicks's history with the aliens, believed he would prove useful in the government's proposed mission to journey to coordinates transmitted by the Dutton that could possibly be the homeworld of the xenomorph. Hicks was offered a position aboard the USCSS Benedict, second in command to Colonel Stevens. His proposal was simple. You seek redemption, I seek specimens. While Hicks faced his chance for redemption, Newt's experiences back on Earth were dire. She dreamed of monsters. The dreams tortured her to a point of what seemed to be madness. At Fieldcrest home, she was under constant supervision, with the doctors unable to make any progress. Not so much helping as they were containing her. She was treated with a myriad of heavy drugs constantly, often left near catatonic, left alone with her thoughts. I'm staring at the ceiling. Tranked again. Authority, I think. The one that makes you feel like you're suffocating. I relive the past again and again. I was born on a terraformer transport in deep space. Parents named me Rebecca, but everyone called me Newt. Our new home was a desolate rock, christened Acheron. My parents had volunteered for the mission in the romantic spirit of the old Earth pioneers, but there was little romance on that cruel world. The winds and the cold meant nothing to the aliens. They waited, dormant, until the time was right. I was the only survivor. I was found by a Marine rescue team and returned to Earth. The doctors lost interest in me, and I didn't respond to their treatments. Bad dreams? Sedatives. Can't eat? Sedatives. Talk out of turn? Sedatives. I'll never make it. Everything's slipping away. The doctors can't figure me out. I didn't do anything. I just don't get along. Is that crazy? I didn't ask to be born out there. Nobody warned me about the risks. Some see space as a panacea, uncounted worlds and untold riches. They look to the heavens and see the joy of opportunity. I look into space and see the cold void of hell. My only escape. Newt's nightmares stretched on endlessly, becoming routine. Then one day there was a change. She received a visitor. A man, one side of his face scarred, sat in the chair 2 meters away from her. He wore a military uniform. "Hello, Newt. I had to see you." It was as if somebody suddenly slammed a fist into the side of her head. The jolt rocked her physically. Newt jerked and stared as a memory they tried to take away from her swam to the surface like a whale needing air. It was him, the man who'd always saved her in her dreams. Hicks. "Yeah. How they treating you in here?" You're real." "Last time I looked, yeah." You look different. He touched the scars on his face. Colonial Marine surgeons, bunch of butchers. What are you doing here? They told me you were in this place. I figured I had to see you, once I found out you were having the dreams too. About the monsters. Yeah, I don't sleep that well myself. Haven't since Acheron. It was real, wasn't it? Oh yeah, it was real. They had me. I'm in as long as they keep reactivating my secrecy clause. But you were a civilian. They decided to wipe you. But it didn't work. At least, not all the way. Newt slumped, but at the same time felt a sense of relief like none she'd ever known. It was real. She wasn't crazy. The dreams were memories, trying to get out. Hicks stared at the kid. Well, she wasn't really a kid anymore, was she? Turned out to be a nice-looking woman, even in the hospital whites and
Whoa, chill,
obviously
Hicks,
stoned,
chill.
whatever they gave her. He wasn't sure why he'd come, except that maybe she was the only person who would understand the dreams he kept having. Why did you come? She asked. He pulled his thoughts back to the young woman on the other side of the thick, clear plastic wall. They found what they think is the homeworld for those things, he said. They're sending me there with some troops. A few seconds went past. To destroy it? Hicks smiled, but it was a sour expression. To collect a specimen. I think MI wants to use the things as some kind of weapon. No, you can't let them. Kid, I can't stop them. I'm a corporal. And a drunk and a chemhead brawler, he added, mentally. Take me with you, she said. You don't mean that. I shouldn't have come here. Can't you see? They're killing me. I'm not crazy. The memories are real. You can tell them. They're trying to convince me everything I remember is an illusion, but you know the truth. Tell them. You saved me before, Hicks. Do it again. They're killing me in here with all the drugs, the therapy. I have to get out. The visitation was quickly terminated. Both Hicks and Newt were escorted away. The last thing Hicks could hear were Newt's screams for help. As his training began, Hicks shifted his focus to his bitter hatred of the alien. Every moment brought him back to the memories of Acheron. Even his new team reminded him of the old squad, and his thoughts kept coming back to Newt. He kept an eye on her. Pulling a few favors, he accessed Newt's files on the Fieldcrest security mainframe. 12 hours before mission launch, he saw the latest update. Newt was scheduled for a full lobotomy. Hicks,
Full
conflicted,
lobotomy.
left the base and made his way to the institution, his mind racing. Why'd I see her in the first place? Maybe I just wanted someone here to remember me, and it was over. Christ, I don't know. There was a time when living and dying meant something to me. My old squad, Hudson, Vasquez, and the rest, faced hell itself to rescue a scared little girl. Now they wanted to destroy her. Jesus, my friends died to save her. Newt was the only thing left of them. He infiltrated the floor, taking out any security that stood in his way, armed with explosives to blow a way out, and, quote, borrowing a jet rescue ship to make their way back to the base. Hicks recalls, the ship had been designed for high-rise fire rescue, but I remember what Sergeant Apone used to say. Marines don't quit, they adapt. By the time they traced us back to base, it would be too late. One of the joys of taking a suicide mission, I suppose. Reprimands and court-martials lose their sting. For years, the general public had been fed this image of the Marines as intellectual warriors, a college diploma in one hand and M90 rapid fire in the other. I guess it's more comforting to imagine the national defense system in the hands of a stiff-eyed, emotionless martinet than some scared teenager with a skin bug. After a while, the Marines themselves bought into the myth. Big mistake. Soldiers have the same wants and desires as everyone else. Sometimes they do things not because it's right or wrong, but because they must. For instance, nobody expects a Marine corporal to resort to an unauthorized passenger aboard a top-security military flight. Maybe that's why it was so easy. Hicks had secured Newt, along with his new squad of grunts, and the USCSS Benedict cleared for takeoff on its mission. 13 years had separated them, but Hicks and Newt were together once more, to help each other, to find answers, to survive. It was unclear how their mission would succeed once they arrived at the alien homeworld, but little did they know there would be a new challenge to face now that Operation Outreach was now in effect. The Earth War is one of the most crucial events in the Alien Extended Universe. Over time, its narrative has been obscured, revisions made, names changed. There are claims that challenge its very existence. The purpose of these accounts is to tell the best possible truths of the war and the events that followed. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very, very special thanks goes out to Wayland G20 executive M. Yorick, part of the Patreon Hive. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow at Alien_Theory on Twitter and at AlienTheoryYT on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off. The threat of the Earth War was looming, perhaps not entirely obvious, but slowly growing beneath the surface, like a parasite gestating, making ready to burst. The incident involving the junket vessel garnered the attention of the government but also private interests, namely Bionational, a corporation eager to claim first rights to any xenomorph specimens. Bionational had found themselves at an advantage, having retrieved the pilots of the junket, James Lukowski, who had ejected from the doomed vessel, and was confirmed to be carrying a xenomorph embryo. As per their progress report, the government vessel Benedict has launched on schedule. First in command Colonel Stevens, second in command Corporal Hicks. Our chase ship KO-14 launched in pursuit immediately thereafter, captained by Bionational Executive Assistant Patrick Massey. The government is seeking to retrieve specimens of an alien life form for its weapons development program. If they are successful, this could seriously impact Bionational's claim of sole patent rights on the new lifeform technology. The KO-14's mission is twofold. First, to follow the Benedict to the alien homeworld and gather biological data on the lifeform. Second, to inhibit the Benedict's crew from retrieving a viable test subject. Captain Massey has been given carte blanche toward this end. In the interim, our Bionational research team continues its examination of the specimen salvaged from the ejected pilot's pod of the cargo vessel Junket. The human specimen's pod had been damaged, causing loss of atmosphere, but vital signs were somehow preserved by the infusion of the alien life form. After retrieval, both specimens were brought to Bionational's Houston labs for analysis. Preliminary reports from our weapons specialists are encouraging. Full-scale testing should commence within the next 48 hours. We shall provide daily updates for all members of the Bionational board. The patient, Lukowski, James T., lay in the pressor grip of a state-of-the-art Hyperdyne Systems Model 24042 diagnoster. His EEG, ECG, myotinous level, tablet rate, systems mitosis rates, and full blood counts flowed in continuous waves, words, and patterns across the monitor. Blood pressure, respiration, and pulse rate were noted and logged. The diagnoster checked and corrected the temperature so the patient was not too cold nor too hot. The IV shunt in his left femoral vein fed him the perfect liquid mix of nutrients for optimum health. An indwelling Foley catheter and rectal drain carried away wastes. The company had spared no expense when it came to taking care of this particular patient. The clean room was under full isolation technique, and all visitors, medical or corporate, wore full osmotic surgical suits with their own air supply. The south wall was mirrored one way, and observers could see the patient directly through the triple-pane glass, should they choose. 7 doctors formed the main care team, with 6 medical technicians working in shifts as monitors, plus 18 guards and a full alert status for the entire wing of the Metaplex. Lukowski was not going anywhere, nor was anybody not cleared coming to see him. 2 men stood in the observation room, watching the patient. One was tall, fair, almost bald, and brilliant. He was Tobias Driner, MD, TAS, PhD, and the team leader. The other man was shorter, darker, hairier, and not quite so smart, but hardly stupid. He was Louis Rain, also MD, TAS, but without the extra doctorate in biosystems. Still, he was a company man and a vice president in the biomed division, which counted for a lot. Driner was in charge of the patient, but Rain was in charge of the project. As they observed, the creature had lodged itself in the subject's digestive system, drawing relatively insignificant amounts of blood and fluids. Nevertheless, it was growing at an incredible rate. Ethical questions had been raised regarding the propriety of informing the subject, considering the ultimate prognosis. They had a unique opportunity to study the development of an utterly new alien life form. Reactions of the host could be important. Of course he would have to know. Lukowski had been given the news. There was a thing growing inside him. Sooner or later it was going to pop out of him like a birthday surprise, eating its way free, and when it was born, he would die. He had been numb with the shock, and when that had worn off, the fear had claimed him. He was going to die. Dr. Driner and Dr. Rain were sorry, but there was nothing they could do.
Sorry, this guy must be Canadian.
Can't you kill it? Cut it out? Not without killing you, Driner said. It's a very tenacious life form. He was calm, as if he were discussing the weather. Easy for him. He didn't have a monster growing in his belly. So I'm like an incubation chamber for this thing. There is not a question. Yes, listen, if it is any consolation, your wife will get the full insurance. She'll be taken care of. Oh, right. That makes me feel a whole lot better. The sarcasm made the words bitter. Now that he knew what it was, he was sure he could feel the thing moving inside him, getting ready to rip his guts out. No! Hey! He said, putting his hands over his belly. He suddenly stood up next to the bed, made himself sway a little. The doctors showed concern. Lukowski, are you all right? James. They weren't worried about him, he realized, but about their pet creature inside him. Rain backed away. The pain in his stomach increased, a sharp burning, as if a hot knife were being driven into him. An amplified voice said, "Vital signs in flux. Doctors. Heart rate up. Blood pressure rising. Myotonus pushing the limit." Jim glanced at his own body. His bare flesh bulged suddenly, just under his sternum. The pain was incredible. It was time. Driner reached out and touched the bulge on the patient's solar plexus. The skin immediately flattened. "Amazing," he said. Rain said, "Get in here with the catch net." The man on the table screamed, a primal noise that set Rain's teeth on edge. Lord, what a sound. "Hurry up with that damn net." Rain turned back toward the man on the table. "Won't the pressure field hold it?" Driner asked. "I doubt it. Insufficient mass. Where the hell is the net?" The amplified voice said, "Nobody is suited up out here. It'll take a minute." "This shouldn't be happening yet," Driner said. "Our term estimates were obviously wrong," Rain finished. "If somebody doesn't come through the lock in 30 seconds with that catch net, I will fire the entire fucking staff," he yelled. "None of you will ever work in this field again." To Driner, Rain said, "This specimen is invaluable. Nothing can be allowed to happen to it. Nothing." He leaned over the struggling man. The patient screamed again. His flesh erupted, burst outward, and the alien's blind toothed head came forth. "Good God," Driner said, leaning away from it. Rain, fascinated, leaned closer. "Why, look at it. Fascinating." "Here's the net," someone said. Rain twisted back toward the patient, too slowly. The thing shot out of the dying man, impossibly fast, like a thick, armored, blood-slick arrow. It hit Rain's clean suit, bit the osmotic material, and chewed through the heavy substance as if it were tissue paper. Rain, horrified, stared at the thing. "Bring the net," Driner yelled. "Hurry!" Now Rain had sought to bat at the thing, but its head was already inside the protective suit. He felt it reach his skin. "It's biting me! Get it off!" Driner reached for the thing's tail, but his gloved hand slipped on the gore that coated it. moved away from his touch, pulling more of itself into Rain's suit. The tech with the catch net grabbed Rain, but the doctor twisted away from him in panic. In his fear, he tried to run from what was attacking him. The inner hatch had not cycled closed. Rain ran for it. "Lewis, no, you'll breach insulation." Rain was beyond hearing, beyond caring. The only thing that mattered was that this thing was eating into him, burning like molten metal. "Stop him!" Driner yelled. The tech reached for Rain, missed, got in Driner's way. They tangled, fell. Driner scambled up, in time to see Rain clear the inner lock, lunge for the outer lock's control. "Freeze the control doors," Driner yelled. Too late. Rain pounded on the emergency override. The outer door slid wide. He staggered out into the hall. Isolation was blown. Driner ran after his boss, yelling for him to stop. "Kill it! Kill it!" Rain screamed. The security guards pulled their guns. "No!" Driner yelled. "Don't shoot it!" The guard looked confused. "Shoot him in the head," Driner commanded. Now the guards looked really puzzled. "Do it!" The guards didn't move. Rain started to run. He might damage the specimen. Driner moved. He grabbed a gun from the nearest guard, who didn't try to stop him. He raised the weapon. Driner put the red dot square on the middle of the fleeing man's clean suit helmet, took a deep breath, let part of it out, held it, and squeezed the trigger carefully so as not to pull his aim off. 12 meters now, it was an easy shot. Rain's head shattered. He fell. Driner lowered the weapon. "Sorry, Lewis," he said. "But you were the one who said how valuable the alien was. We can't chance hurting it." The guards and techs stared at him. "Now," he said, "bring the catch net." He still had the gun. They all moved very fast. And in the end, they didn't even need the net. Apparently, the thing liked where it was. Good. That made it even easier. Further monitoring and research of the specimen was necessary at this juncture, but for the time being, much weighed on the success of Massey's mission. It was imperative to Bionational's interests to have a firm claim on the xenomorph. It was, of course, a unique specimen, highly adaptive, immeasurably dangerous, and to a select few, it was a figure of worship. In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War as depicted in the Aliens comic series, and the events leading up to it, as well as its aftermath. The accounts are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. If you missed it, the previous video in this series is the survival of Hicks and Newt. Stay tuned for the next video, in which I'll be exploring Operation Outreach and more of the Benedict's mission, and Massey's interferences. And as always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very, very special thanks goes out to Weyland-Yutani executive, M. Yorick, part of the Patreon Hive. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off. Executive Assistant Patrick Massey was considered an invaluable resource to Bionational and their interests, often negotiating mergers in his unorthodox but effective manner. He was the clear choice to command Operation Outreach, with an unquestioning loyalty to his employer and a focus on completing mission objectives by any means necessary. Massey's accolades were impressive: MBA from Harvard, doctorate in corporate law from Cornell. He could have had his pick of the big two companies. Instead, he enlisted in the Marines, received the Silver Star for bravery during the Oil War, 4 Purple Hearts, with a few hundred confirmed kills under his belt. It had been believed, however, that he didn't enlist out of patriotism. He liked it. He commanded a recon unit in the Tansu Rebellion on Wakashi's world, picked up a few decorations there. He had more decorations than a Christmas tree. Then suddenly, an illustrious military career was halted when he was court-martialed. It seems he tried to kill his commanding officer for failure to order a squad to attack a civilian encampment. He thought the CO was a coward when he wouldn't order an attack on a group of civilians Massey thought might be hiding enemy sympathizers. He knocked the officer senseless and led the attack himself. He killed 85 men, women, and children. Word is more than half of them got dispatched by Massey personally. Bionational, aware of his reputation and seeing the value, paid off the military tribunal and hired him immediately. As Rain was quick to muse on the matter of Massey, good help is hard to find, and it's rare when you find a man who loves his work. While Bionational had an appreciation for Massey's skill set and methods, they were not without a particular set of reservations. A cap of C9 Surset had been injected into his hypothalamus along with a beeper during a routine physical.
Oh my goodness.
The contingency was that if Massey ever turned on the company, somebody in security would only need to get within a click of him and send a coded pulse, and blammo. Massey, however, was aware of the bioexplosive implanted within him. He sought the services of a private doctor to perform a surgery that would alter the implant's abilities without raising any suspicion. He'd kept the locator they'd put in, its tracking in place, but disarmed. He didn't give a damn if they knew where he was for now. When he decided he didn't want them to know anymore, the beeper would stop sending its signal as quickly as he could touch a button on his belt. As long as they let him do his job, Massey wouldn't have any problems with the company. But if they somehow lost faith, well, there was no point in being unprepared. Mistakes happened, even though he didn't make them. Always better to be ready than not. The job this time was a big one, worth a lot of credits. For him, the money was just a way to keep score. So far, Massey was winning big. There wasn't anybody else close. He was the best. He intended to keep on being the best for a long, long time.
The best.
Massey was married with a child. He, of course, never shared the sensitive nature of his work with those closest to him. Before Massey left for Operation Outreach, however, there had been an unexpected matter of security that suddenly arose. Driner and Rain had discussed the situation, still remaining optimistic about their venture despite the situation. Driner explained. Well, one of the communications people slipped up, sent an uncoded file to Massey's residence. Computer didn't catch it. Real snafu. That would have been bad enough, but unfortunately, Massey's son accessed the material. The boy showed it to his mother. Neither of them understood the full implications, of course, but they got enough of it to possibly compromise the mission. Massey was in the shower when the message came through. When he got out, his wife started babbling about what they'd just seen. Massey really had no choice, not if he wanted to maintain security. It was SOP, of course, but they had been married for 6 years. Even as cover, you'd think he'd want somebody else to do the wet work on this one.
No way.
He did it himself. The company made sure the investigative team from the local police were friendlies, and Massey's story about coming home to find them dead was accepted. The local law figures it was a robbery gone bad, or a wilding by somebody clever enough to bypass building security.
I need to
Under the circumstances, Massey performed admirably. Had the psych boys do a workup on him right before liftoff, and he registered well within tolerable limits. I wonder how it feels, being a sociopath. I would imagine it's quite liberating. In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War as depicted in the Aliens comic series and the events leading up to it, as well as its aftermath. The accounts are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. If you missed it, the previous video in this series is Bionational's Xenomorph Specimen. Stay tuned for the next video, which will be going into further detail on Operation Outreach. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like. You can also subscribe for all the latest videos. A very, very special thanks goes out to Weyland-Yutani Executive, M. Yorick, part of the Patreon Hive. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.
Nicely done. Armor and Hearthstone secured. Call the drop pod when you're ready. Drop pod's on the way. Hang in there.
Bionational Internal Memorandum regarding Operation Outreach. Progress Report. Government Vessel Benedict lifted as scheduled. Standard ship crew plus squads 1 through 4. Fox Platoon, Company Able, 1st XT Division, 2nd Colonial Marines. Colonel H.S. Stevens commanding. See attached, Personnel Appendix A. Bionational ship KO-14 launched in pursuit. Echo Lock, full robotics and expendable EXP series android crew under the command of Executive Assistant Security, P. Massey. Joel, you know the general layout of this, but I'll recap some of the particulars you might have missed while you were on vacation. The alien life form the Gov guys want is the Big Nasty, and naturally they'd like to score it for their own weapons program. Needless to say, this would compromise our own profit structure were it to happen. With the recent Supreme Court decision on patentable life forms vis-a-vis created versus discovered, we might spend 10 years in the fucking legal system trying to unsnarl this mess. So Uplevels decided that we should tail the feds to the homeworld, the location of which is so damn secret we couldn't pry it out of anybody for blackmail or money, and get as much info as we could. And of course, we don't want the feds to get their own specimen. This guy, Massey, has his orders, and he's the best there is. He will do whatever it takes to stop them. You probably have heard that research got its hands on a guy salvaged from a cargo express, one of ours, fortunately, with one of the Big Nasty embryos wrapped around his face. The ship was cold, systems dead, but somehow this thing had kept him in stasis, almost as if he'd been in a sleep tank. Hell, that alone is worth a fortune if we can figure out how the hell it did it. Anyway, both the crewman and the bug on his face were still alive, so they've been brought to the Houston labs for analysis. We're still way ahead of the feds on this, and already geared up for full-scale testing. Start figuring out ways to spend your bonus, Joel. We're all gonna get rich off this one. That's it on the main deal. There's some other stuff in this memo the Psycho Boys are concerned about, so I'll let you get to it. See you lunch Tuesday. Ben. The crew of the Benedict had awoken from hypersleep, soon approaching their destination. There was, of course, a passenger on board not originally accounted for. The surprise took a while to filter through to Stevens. Hicks wondered if the man would have noticed at all had not the head count come out one too many. The squads picked it up right away. They all knew each other, so Newt stood out for them. But Stevens was a chair jockey. He had a list of his troops somewhere, and couldn't yet identify them by names or faces. Stevens inquired about the +1 on his roster. Hicks explained that he was responsible for bringing the extra person, claiming her to be a civilian expert on the aliens. Hardly a satisfying answer for Stevens. "I am going to throw you in the brig and scramble the code," Stevens said, still looking for who didn't belong. "Sir, you could do that, but perhaps Gen Staff might be interested in knowing why the CO didn't discover the stowaway before liftoff, given that a final inspection is part of the CO's duties. Sir." Hicks knew this was Stevens' first field command, and that he did not want anything to mar it, make him look bad. Now was the time for his pitch. Stevens was pissed, no doubt about it, but he had to be working the angles, trying to see how this was going to look once he got home. Since Hicks wouldn't bet a bent Democrat that he was going to get home, that didn't matter much to him. But Stevens wouldn't be thinking like that. "Sir, if I could show you that you were responsible for taking on a civilian expert, then there wouldn't be any problem. You buried a CMA code in your log, didn't you?" Hicks hadn't been able to check Stevens' CO log. The access commands for that were beyond his abilities as a computer break-in artist, but he was fairly certain that the colonel had installed the CMA, cover my ass, code, so that it was dated near the start of the mission. This was standard of practice among nervous officers, a simple piece of insurance that could sit there unused unless something wonky came up. It was easy enough. Log entries were all automatically timed and dated. A CMA code was some innocuous piece of input, usually a phrase that was related to whatever data were going in, but stilted in such a way that it didn't quite fit. If a situation arose that was unforeseen, the officer could use the code to cover himself by entering new data, and then referring back to the phrase as if it had been put there in anticipation of such happenings. Any lengthy phrase could be made to say almost anything a bright computer wanted later, and the officer could swear he or she had known about it in advance and covered it, but in code, so as to keep things secret from prying eyes. "Why should I help you?" Stevens asked. "Because, sir, you'd be helping yourself. I'll put the rumor out that our discussion here is part of a clever subterfuge you worked up, for reasons of your own having to do with some kind of secret military business, about which they don't want to know. When you get back to Earth, you're covered, and I'll go quietly, wherever you want me to go." Stevens considered it. He didn't like it, Hicks could see that, but he was thinking about his future, and that was the most important thing on his agenda. "All right," he said. "Trot him out and let me see him." "See her," Hicks said. "Where did you get her?" "I broke her out of a mental hospital, sir." The matter was more or less settled. Newt was now part of the team, despite Stevens' reservations and hindrances that may have been presented regarding plans of his own. But the arrival to the alien homeworld coordinates was soon approaching, and there was little use in losing focus on the mission at hand at this juncture. Newt fit in about as well as could be expected. There were suspicions and rumors and confusion about her presence. Hicks kept a close eye on her, even as it became apparent that Newt slowly began developing a relationship with one of Hicks's grunts, Private Bueller. As the mission continued, Newt reflected on the events so far. "I was standing at one of the viewports, staring into space. The light from the stars stretched around the ship like glowing white neon. I was trying to remember my parents. All I could remember was the blood. In the midst of this, what did Bueller see in me? No one had ever shown interest in me before. At first it didn't make any sense. Then I realized he was like me. He knew how it felt to be alone. Hicks gave me a schedule of token administrative duties to keep me occupied during this voyage. Hatred of the aliens burned inside him like an open flame. It was all that sustained him. He'd lost all sense of compassion. I shared his hatred of the aliens, but suddenly our bitter quest seemed empty, almost ugly. Bueller and I found an unused storage unit behind the engine compartment and met as often as we could. It was also new to me. Maybe Hicks had been hating so long, he'd forgotten what it was like to care about someone. Maybe I had been locked away for so long I'd never had the chance to try. We stood at the viewport, staring into space. The aliens destroyed my life once. I couldn't stop them then, but I could stop it from happening again. As the ship approached the aliens' homeworld, I was overwhelmed by a hideous premonition of death. Bueller and I spent every spare moment together. I knew he shared my apprehensions. There was an air of desperation to our encounters, as if we didn't dare waste an instant. We made love that final day, surrounded by the bleak gray metal of the ship's hull. I remember thinking how frail we were next to our machines, and for the first time since Acheron, I cried. In his quarters on the chase ship, Massey sat seasoned, concentrated on his breathing. He had never learned to meditate as the Masters did, but he could use it to calm his system. Sure, he exercised his body, practiced fighting techniques, drilled over and over again with weaponry, but these things brought him no joy. They were there to keep him crisp, to maintain his cutting edge. Nothing more. Being in top shape was part of the business, necessary, and he trained himself as if he were a prized show animal. Proper diet, enough rest, technical mastery is required, no more, no less. He was the equal of any serious athlete, and against the few who might be in better physical shape or with faster reflexes, he augmented himself with drugs or figured out ways to cheat. If you wanted a man dead, it was better to shoot him in the back from long range than to stand facing him like some Holovoid hero. that was a fool's game, and since the last man standing was the victor, it was better to slant things your way when possible. Soon, another test would come. He must be ready for it. So he sat, but it was not mindless meditation, but mindful scheming that filled him. In a contest like this, there could be no second-place winner. To be second was to be last, and to be last here was to be dead. Private Jones was taking her turn at the proximity sensor board. 10 minutes into her tour, a bogey began blipping. She wasn't deep in this kind of work, but since the computer did most of it, all she had to do was ask. She alerted Colonel Stevens. Jones said, "Sir, the PS says there's a vessel out there, only 100 clicks back, and closing. The thing must have blown a circuit or something, right?" "Could be an echo. That happens," Stevens said. "Run a diagnostic." "Affirmative, sir." Jones touched a button. The image gridded, words sprayed across it, and the result came up almost immediately. "Diagnostic check complete. All systems functional." "Damn," Jones said. "Excuse me, sir. There is a ship out there. I'll sound general alert." She searched for the red button cover, started to flip it up so she could reach the alarm control. "No," Stevens said. "Sir, if that's a ship, we have to assume it's hostile to our mission. That's SOP." By now, Jones had turned enough to see that Stevens had drawn his sidearm, an issue soft slug pistol. He shot her, through the left eye. Gore splattered on his coverall as Jones's head snapped back and smashed into the sensor board. "Sorry," Stevens said, reholstering his weapon. The colonel waved his hands over the comm units. "Stevens here," he said. "Everything is set. Prepare for docking." "Copy that," came Massey's voice from the comm. "We are on the way." While General Alert hadn't been alarmed, the squad certainly felt the KO-14's docking. They went to arm themselves, only to find the loading mechanisms of their rifles had been pulled, rendered useless. They were sensing a setup. Colonel Stevens spoke on the intercom, ordering all Marines to report to the loading bay immediately. They were met with Massey's ambush. The hatch slid up and assault-suited men sprinted through the opening, splitting into two groups, one heading fore, the other aft. Two of them brought their hardware to bear on Hicks. These were automatic shotguns that fired frangible epoxy-bearing lead pellets. They didn't have much penetration, but against an unarmed human target, they were deadly enough. They didn't call them splatter guns for nothing. Hicks raised his hands. The last man sauntered into the ship proper, an antique 10mm recoilless Smith TA only pistol in one hand. He waved the gun at Hicks. "Hello, Marine. New in town?" "Right on schedule, Massey," Stevens said. Hicks felt his guts twist. Stevens was a traitor. He didn't know who this Massey was, or who he represented. One of the war cartels, maybe, some corporation, but Stevens had sold them out. Newt had been left behind by Bueller, and not being officially part of the crew, her absence was not noticed or accounted for by the team of Operation Outreach. Once again, she was alone, and scared. Her thoughts raced. For one brief moment, I'd found love. Hicks's grunts, a Marine named Bueller. What is it about life that, as soon as you find something good, then it's taken away from you? I could feel the panic rising in my chest, choking, claustrophobic. My first instinct was to hide, just like Acheron, just like Earth. That's what the enemy depends on. Human, alien, they rely on that fear to endure. It explained the resilience of creatures like the alien. They don't understand fear. They don't understand anything beyond their existence. I knew I would have to become like them to survive. It had been 4 hours since we'd been boarded. Who the hell were they? Soldiers? Mercenaries? It didn't matter. It wouldn't have mattered to them. From her hiding place, she could see Hicks being held at gunpoint, and that Stevens had been executed. Massey's logic was that if a man like Stevens would sell out his own crew, how much could he really trust him? But there still was Hicks, yet again finding himself in command of a mission after everyone who outranked him was dead. He tried to get information from Massey, anything he could use. I still can't figure out where the corporation found the balls to intercept a government ship on a classified mission. I think you'll find the corporation capable of almost anything. We still believe in free enterprise, capitalism. Your government wants the alien life form for itself. My government? You make it sound like the corporation is an independent state. Jesus, those things destroyed Acheron. Think what they could do on Earth. I have. We're breeding them. You'll stay with me aboard the Benedict. Your men seem to respect you. I might be able to use that. You've already got those things on Earth. Why not just kill us and be done with it? Oh, you're going to die. Rest assured of that. But I'm sure you'll understand the call of science. We're charged with investigating the homeworld before returning to Earth. Never know what you might find. If their homeworld follows traditional patterns, there's probably some sort of ecological balance. Predator, prey, like Earth, like you and me. The alien is a remarkable life form, but it may not be the dominant species on its homeworld. A corporation like Bionational succeeds by staying one step in front of the competition. In 5 years, the alien will be obsolete, passé. We'll need to find newer, superior biological weapons. We are fishing. Your Marines are bait. Hicks's crew approached the Xenomorph homeworld. They were the bait, and were soon to see if Massey's theory of ecological balance held true. Surviving the mission was more of an uncertainty than ever before. Whatever inhabited this world was a mystery, though back on Earth, at Bionational's lab, there had been interesting developments. Triner remained invested in their studies. He even kept a close eye on Rain, who was under constant surveillance in his new environment. Hello again. It's Ostro. Just checking in. The others have forgotten your sacrifice, but I remember. I'll always remember. We captured it while it fed on you. It seemed to need that primitive animal kinship. While it acclimated to the artificial environment, you were its home. You gave it your body, your life. At least you didn't die in vain. You would have been thrilled with our progress. Originally, of course, we'd planned to study the specimen while awaiting the return of the KO-14. For once, we'd had a bit of luck. You see, the creature we captured was a queen, and that changed things. In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War, as depicted in the Aliens comic series, and the events leading up to it, as well as its aftermath. The accounts are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. If you missed it, the previous video in this series is Bionational Executive Assistant Patrick Massey, a profile, and stay tuned for the next video about the alien homeworld. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very, very special thanks goes out to Wayland Yutani Executive, M. Yorick, part of the Patreon Hive. Thank you for your support. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.
Oh no.
The coordinates had been discovered. The trek to the alien homeworld had been complete. And for the first time, at least to the knowledge of the Earth government, man had set down on what seemed to be the planet from which the Xenomorph had originated. This was a government endeavor, however, Bionational Industries, in an operation led by Executive Assistant Patrick Massey, had taken over the mission. Aboard the USCSS Benedict, in the planet's orbit, Massey remained, along with Corporal Hicks, leading their squads to land on the planet's surface. The APC sensors gathered information on the planet: gravity, atmosphere, lighting, weather conditions, all kinds of readings, and spewed into the Benedict's recorders. Offhand, it didn't look like a world that was going to become a vacation spot anytime soon. Gravity a bit higher than Terran standard, maybe a G1/4. The local star made most of the planet tropical, at least weather-wise. There were small ice caps at the poles, but even the more temperate regions would give you body heat plus a couple degrees. Vegetation was sparse, the oceans were full of nasty salts, and there didn't seem to be many places where an unprotected human could survive, even without killer locals prowling for supper. The poisoned air would require full-time nighters or implants. Under the cloud cover, the land below was dull and gray, scraggly trees or whatever passed for them. Lots of young igneous rock exposed to the air, sharp edges and dirty colors. Massey watched from the remote hovercam as the Marines marched out onto the surface of the alien world. In full gear, 6 of his own troops floated in 3 small open-air podcraft over the walking Marines. The androids in the pods were armed, and the Marines below knew they could either do as they were told or be cut down. Private Bueller and the first squad approached the mound cautiously, walking knowingly to their deaths. The mound, nest, hive, whatever, looked like an apartment building-sized anthill. The surface was ridged and convoluted, dull blackish gray with bits of lighter color here and there. As they drew nearer, Bueller saw that the lighter bits were bones, a lot of them skulls, all blended into the surface. There was an oval-shaped entrance with a beaten path leading to it maybe 100 meters ahead. The 6 of them moved toward the entrance of the mound. Once they were inside the place, maybe they could just squat down and not go in any deeper. The group reached the entrance. Bueller flicked his shoulder light on and took a deep breath. He stepped into the mound first. Massey had theorized that the xenomorph may not be the only life form inhabiting the mysterious planet, that surely a food chain may exist. Predators and prey, wherever the xenomorph may be placed in this ecosystem. It would soon become clear they did not live on the planet alone. Massey was staring through the holographic readouts when a tiny chime called for his attention. He focused on the screen. The 3 AirPods were holding over the entrance to the first mound. The other Marine squads hadn't quite made it to their destinations yet. The Doppler showed aircraft closing in on the AirPods. Impossible, he thought. There wasn't any civilization on this world. The aliens didn't have, couldn't have, flying devices. Then he realized what was wrong with the images. No heat signatures, no power leakage, no radio or radar or Doppler. Either the craft were so primitive they had to be gliders, or... Massey blinked. Team 1, he said. Alert. The first wave of flying creatures dived on the AirPods. Cameras caught and recorded the images. They looked reptilian, with grayish, scaled skin. They had delta-shaped wings that spanned at least 10 meters, short, sleek bodies, and elongated heads with rows of pointed teeth. Carnivores, definitely. There were a dozen in the first group, and they attacked soundlessly the 3 pods. The pods spiraled down toward the ground, 4 or 5 of the beasts following them in controlled dives. The first pod splatted against the ground, shattered, and hurled the 2 androids away from the impact. Almost instantly, the flying creatures were upon the androids, tearing at them, ripping limbs from torsos, and spraying circulating fluid up into thin white fountains. Bueller and the rest of Hicks's squad had sought shelter from the attack inside the structure that they referred to as the giant anthill. They were, however, trespassing,
Descriptive.
and they were not alone inside.
Jesus.
In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War, as depicted in the Aliens comic series, and the events leading up to it, as well as its aftermath. The accounts are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. If you missed it, the previous video in this series is Operation Outreach. Stay tuned for the next video about the Anthill Skirmish, a crucial event in the trajectory of the war. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very special thanks goes out to Weyland-Yutani Executive, M. Yorick, part of the Patreon Hive. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media, follow @alien_theory on Twitter, and @AlienTheoryYT on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off. I knew I would have to kill them. The ducks swarmed through the ship, separated by an intricate network of automatic interior doors. The aliens used similar tunnels to attack us on Acheron. Someone pulled the loaders from the Marines' blasters, probably that piece of shit Stevens. I saw what was left of him splatter down in the loading bay. It saved me the trouble. I couldn't imagine Stevens actually jettisoning the loaders. He was too prudent for that. The intruders were calm, confident they were in complete control. Despite so many warnings, Hicks and his Marines made a similar mistake on Acheron. It was a matter of perception. The aliens would have understood. The Benedict didn't belong to those bastards in the loading bay. It belonged to me. Newt was determined to do what she did best, survive. After years of her dreams, she had felt a connection with the aliens. Whatever visited her during her long stretches of sleep and in the waking nightmare of the Fieldcrest Hospital revealed to her at least some kind of truth about their nature and of herself. She was somehow envious of their cold nature. She thought of Bueller and the time they had spent together. No, she thought. Forget Bueller. Forget everything good. The aliens didn't need love. Loneliness, fear, the concepts were meaningless to them. They only knew death. They kept things simple. Inside the anthill, surviving members of both Hicks's and Massey's squads were facing against the planet's inhabitants. They were 200 meters into the mound when the first wave of aliens came at them. A dozen of the things, moving impossibly fast, fangs bared, claws extended, green beams flashed past them and burned limbs from bodies. Several of the things fell and skidded on the ridged floor, and others tangled with them. It was over in 5 seconds, and the 12 attacking aliens lay burned or shattered, smoke rising, blood touched the hive. Not that something that acidic could really be called blood. Massey had been monitoring the situation, weighing his options. Yes, this was much more challenging than he had expected. Still, it was a minor setback. He had uploaded a raft of information about the planet, and his primary mission, to keep the government from securing an alien specimen, was accomplished. Should he continue this, or cut his losses and go home? On the one hand, he'd done pretty much everything they wanted him to do. He could tell the company that the surface teams had been destroyed by alien wildlife, and they would shrug it off as nothing. The company had its specimen. Another one would only be backup. On the other hand, he hated the idea of even a partial failure. Screw it. He set the lander to remote destruct. Hicks, helpless and strapped to a chair, could only observe, and he knew he was no longer necessary to Massey's mission. The scientists will raise a fuss over the destruction of inboard documentation, but they'll get over it, Massey said. What about your men? Hicks probed. What about them? This game is being called on account of rain, he said. Time to take my winnings and go home. So long, Hicks. From behind him, a voice commanded to drop his weapon. Newt had the carbine aimed at the pirate's heart, and if he made any sudden moves, she was going to carve it out of him. Massey grinned. He looked like some of the psychotics Newt had seen in lockdown at the hospital. Well, well, what have we here? You the ship's mascot? Stay real still. So that explains the extra on the head count. You can't be one of those ugly Marines. You're too pretty. Crew smuggle you on board for fun and games, maybe? Hicks said, "Shoot him, Newt. Shoot him now." The man glanced at Hicks. "Ah, friend of yours. You have nice taste." He turned back toward Newt. Slid a half a step toward her, hands outstretched wide, trying to look harmless. "Another step and I punch your ticket," she warned. "Come on, sweet little thing like you. You don't want to kill me. Think about what it would be like, being responsible for the death of another human being. It'll give you bad dreams, honey." He slid another half step forward. Newt swallowed, her mouth dry. This man was a killer. She had seen the bodies get spaced, and he had done something with Mitch, but his hands were in the air. The alien would have attacked, she thought. What was wrong with me? Why couldn't I fire? It wasn't fair.
Shoot
I wanted to be just like them. God help me, I was only human. Newt shuffled back a step. I'm telling you, stop right there. Hicks managed to lever himself to his feet by leaning against the bulkhead. Newt, this guy is a murderer. You have to put him down. Shoot! She glanced at Hicks. A mistake. As soon as her attention left the pirate, he leapt. God, he was fast. Newt pulled the trigger on the carbine, but he was already twisting, dropping under the line of her fire. Half a dozen rounds shattered a computer console. The noise was awful. Lights flickered as the power surged and shorted in the plugged console. She tried to realign the weapon, but too late. He hit her above the knees, and she did a half flip forward and landed on her back. Stupid bitch, he said as he rolled up and caught Newt by the shoulders. Point a goddamn gun at me. He snatched her from the floor, threw her up against the bulkhead. Newt went gray as her head slammed against the wall. Even as she bounced off, he was on her, one hand grabbing her by the shirt, other slapping her face. I don't need a weapon, you stupid cunt. I could tear your throat out with my fingers. He slapped her again. Newt felt a tooth cut the inside of her lip. Blood sprayed from her mouth as he slapped her for a third time. He shoved her back against the wall, lifted her feet clear of the deck by her shirt, pulled his pistol from his holster, and grinned like a maniac. But you're not worth the effort. You're nothing but a distraction. Christ, you remind me of my wife. As he raised the gun to kill her, Newt saw a blur behind him. She couldn't stop her gasp. The pirate tried to turn, but she locked both her hands around the wrist of the hand he held her with. It slowed him enough so that Hicks hit him with one shoulder just above his hip. Newt felt her shirt tear as the pirate was knocked away. She fell to the floor and scrambled on all fours. Toward the carbine where it had fallen. 5 meters, 4, 3. The pirate roared and Newt twisted enough to see him. He had lost his pistol. He was up and diving for it. 2 meters to the carbine. 1. I'll kill both of you. Hicks was sprawled to his side, pushing himself along with only his left foot, toward the pirate. Newt reached the carbine, grabbed it, boiled onto her back. Wouldn't be time to get to her feet. The pirate's gun went off, but she was rolling as she felt the slug hit the deck where she had just been. No time to aim. She pushed the gun out as if it were her first punching and pulled the trigger. The fire selector must have been jiggled when the gun had fallen. It went off once. Newt, expecting full auto, couldn't figure it out. She held the trigger back, waiting for more fire. Nothing. She'd have to let it go and pull it again. But one was enough. The caseless 10mm round caught the pirate just below the shoulder of his gun arm, blew a hole right through him. Newt saw him tumble, the gun falling from his nerveless fingers. The entry wound was the size of her fingertip, but when he fell, she saw the exit wound high on his back. It was as big as her fist. The pistol slid 2 meters away from the fallen man's fingertips. He raised his head, saw the pistol, crawled for it, stretched his good hand out for it. Newt came up, carbine held ready, and jumped for the pistol. Kicked it across the room. Pointed the carbine at the downed man. He rolled over onto his back. Blood poured from his wound, spreading under his head in a coppery-smelling pool. Stupid fucking bitch, he said. He reached for something in his waist. Don't move. Fuck you. He slid his hand into a vertical slit on his coverall over his right hip. She saw him smile as he gripped it. She squeezed the trigger. The explosion was loud in the enclosed room. It lapped against the hard walls and splashed back at her. The smell of burnt propellant filled her nostrils. Her ears rang. The round had hit him square in the mouth, chopped out some front teeth, and blew the back of his head all over the deck and wall behind him. Whatever he had intended to do wasn't ever going to happen. She bent, tugged his hand out. He death-gripped a grenade. The safety cap had already been snapped, and his thumb was on the detonate button. Carefully, Newt pried the grenade loose from the dead man's hand and closed the safety cap. He would have blown them all up, ruined the control room, sent the ship spiraling down to burn in the atmosphere. Now freed by Newt, Hicks ran to the comm board. He looked at the screen. The bullet had shattered the projector. He couldn't see how much time was left. He started tapping controls on the console, swore, then moved to another screen. What is it? He shook his head. I think it's a bomb set on the APC. The first squad got loose. He was afraid they'd get to the APC and come back. What about Mitch? Bueller? I don't know. Call him. Find out. The bomb had gone off, preventing any escape from the planet. Hicks and Newt had to provide the evac. We launched Massey's lander and began the slow descent to the alien's homeworld. I could see Bueller over the ship's monitors. His face was reduced to an abstract blur, tiny electric pulses of light and color. Hicks ignored the screens, lost in his dreams of vengeance. At least he still had that. I had nothing. There were no dreams left for me, just the stark reality of the alien, the stark reality of death. Hicks dropped the lander just outside the alien hive. Sand and dust danced around the ship like some mocking ethereal smoke, like phosphorescent swirls of color flickering across the lander's forward monitor. I think it knew. I think it wanted to teach me a lesson about the futility of love, the horror of trust. I could see it all. Another wave of monsters clattered toward the squad, hissing as they moved. Bueller's carbine rumbled, a giant tearing heavy canvas, and the armor-piercing rounds punched through the bodies where they hit straight on, ricocheted off where they struck at an angle, making sparks like flint on steel. The alien must have been waiting in the darkness for some break in Bueller's attention. It came clattering out, claws scraping and digging into the rocky surface as it cleared the entrance, arms extended, teeth revealed in a moray eel's needle grin. Bueller twisted, swung the carbine around, slipped on a loose piece of rock, shifted, off balance, to his left. The carbine barrel dropped just a hair as he fired. Fired and missed. He tried to correct his aim. The thing was almost on top of him, and he only needed a point shoot, but he was too slow. It crossed its hands, grabbed him, digging one steel-hard claw into his ribs, the other on the opposite side, just under his hip. Talons bit deep. He tried to draw for the slug pistol. The alien flexed muscles hidden under its exoskeleton, cords filled with power a score of times stronger than a man could manage. Bueller felt the pain burn through his waist, a shattering bolt that short-circuited all of his systems, filling him like a sudden plunge into molten aluminum. He managed to scream, then felt the unendurable shock as the thing tore him in half at the waist. Newt saw the parts of Bueller fall, saw his hips and legs fly one way, his upper body another, tumbling, and the white, circulating fluid, not red blood, white, spraying like a milky fountain into the air under the alien sun. Hicks watched the alien rip Bueller apart. He slapped the fire controls for the robot guns trained on the mouth of the alien hive. He saw the edges of the entrance light with tiny flashes as 20mm expended uranium slugs shattered against the walls inside. Having a specific target, the robot gun hosed its bursts in 20 S-shaped patterns from top to bottom, stopping a meter or so short of the ground. The gunfire chopped the alien into pieces, blowing the shattered parts back against the hive like a swat from a giant steel broom. The fire computer locked in the shape of the alien and shut the gun down, waiting for more targets that looked like him. Newt screamed. She was looking at the viewer, and it was dialed up so she couldn't miss what Bueller was. The ancillary nodes of his digestive system hung from his torso. White polymer circulating fluid oozed over everything. Where a human would be soaked with blood and painted bright crimson, Bueller was drenched in milky froth. Tubes, shunts, circulatory lines, all sprayed from the ruined android body. Newt screamed again, a wordless cry. Hicks knew she'd never suspected. Newt! She kept yelling. He's alive, Private Blake said over the comm. She hoisted the terribly wounded android onto her back and crawled back to where the crewman lay. Oh god, oh god, oh god, Newt said. Hicks lost it. I tried to fucking warn you. I tried to keep you away from him. You wouldn't listen to me. Yes, he's an android. The whole platoon. All of them. They're all androids.
We're all androids.
Created for a mission like this. How do you think they manage to breathe that thin air and keep going? They're faster, stronger, cheaper than we are to maintain. Some people didn't like working with them, so the new experimental models were made to pass for human. They eat, drink, piss, act, and even feel like humans. They can hate, fear, love, just like we do. From the outside, even an expert can't tell. Everything external looks just the same. But I guess you know that, don't you? Finally, she turned to look at him. He could see her pain. It went all the way to her core. She had fallen in love with an android that slept with him. For some people, that would be the same as falling in love with a dog or a farm animal and having sex with it. When she spoke, her voice was as cold as deep space. Why didn't you tell me, Hicks? I tried. You didn't want to hear it. You never said anything about androids. By the time I realized I should, it was too late. What was I supposed to say? You're in love with an artificial person who was born in a vat and put together like a puzzle by a bunch of androtechs? You wouldn't have believed it. You should have told me. Yeah, well, my life is full of things I should have done and didn't. The mission is screwed, and we're leaving. The rest of it we can sort out later. Newt turned back to the screen. Blake and the crewmen had what was left of Bueller cradled between them and were approaching the APC at a quick jog. Behind them, the mouth of the alien's nest erupted with dozens of the things. The robot gun worked its deadly magic, hammering the creatures with chunks of armor-piercing death, battering them to pieces. Still, they boiled forth like angry fire ants, ran into the wall of metal, and shattered against it. Dozens, scores, hundreds of them. They kept coming. The robot gun was state-of-the-art. It locked onto the acquired targets, calculated for local gravity, windage, movement, then fired efficiently and dispatched them. But no matter how efficient a weapon, it could only live as long as it was fed. The last of the ammunition ran through the electric machinery. Hicks shook his head. Bad news. The APC had shot up all the ammunition it carried. No one had figured a lot of air-to-air combat would be happening on this mission. And the aliens kept bounding out of that damn nest like giant black termites stoked on steroids and amphetamines. Must be 50 of them heading toward the ship, despite all the ones that had blown away. More of the things climbed over the piled bodies as he watched. Time to leave. Blake and the crewmen and Bueller were only 50 meters away from the ship. Hicks ordered the outer hatch open. Blake entered the cabin. She squatted and carefully eased Mitch onto the deck. There was an aid kit on the wall, but Blake passed it and pulled the plastic box from the cabinet instead. Of course, a human aid kit wouldn't help. The crewman said, "Go, man. Get us the hell out of here." Hicks was in the pilot's seat. "Strap in," he ordered. Only the crewman hustled to obey. Newt stood over Mitch. His eyes were closed. He ended at the waist, and what spilled from his torso was ugly to look upon. "Sit down, Newt." She still didn't move. Something slammed into the APC, hard enough to jolt the vessel to make it ring with the impact. "Shit," the crewman said. More impacts. 3, 5, 10 of them. "They're all over us," the crewman yelled. "Fuck 'em," Hicks said. "We're gone." He punched control. Nothing happened. "What the hell?" the crewman began. "One of them is blocking a thrust skirt tube," Hicks said. "The computer won't fire it. I'll have to go to manual." There came a screech as metal tore. "They're digging through the hull," Newt said. "That's impossible," the crewman said. Hicks tapped the controls. The APC shook, but lifted and wobbled a little, only rose slowly, went up a couple 100 meters. Newt could see through the forward screens. "We're too heavy," Hicks said. "We'll have to shake the fuckers off." The ship lurched, dropped, twisting to port, as though a heavy weight had landed on that side. A siren began screaming from the control panel. Hicks worked it frantically, hands dancing rapidly back and forth. The APC began to level, but it continued to settle. "That's the left propeller," Hicks said. "Emergency brake lock. Something is inside and housing. I can't override." Thumping continued on the hull, more squeals as the metal bent or gave up on the fight. It wouldn't be long before the aliens clawed their way in. Newt looked at the weapons Blake still carried. Hicks wouldn't let the things take them alive. It would be quick, if it came to that. So it didn't matter what she was feeling about Mitch. No, nothing mattered. Her short and mostly unhappy life was about to come to its end. Except for the few hours when she thought Mitch was other than what he turned out to be, it hadn't been much of a life. And she should tell him that, since they were going to die. The ship thrummed. A sound unlike anything Hicks had ever heard washed over them, vibrating every surface in the APC. He dropped to his knees and clapped his hands over his ears. He felt the vibration to his core. It made the marrow in his bones hum. Abruptly, the sound died. Hicks stood, shaken. What the hell had that been? "Listen," Blake said. "I don't hear anything," Crewman said. Hicks nodded. "That's right. The aliens have stopped attacking us." It was as quiet as an isolation chamber. They all looked at Hicks. "Let's take a look, Blake." Hicks took a couple of deep breaths, then moved to the hatch. He held the carbine ready, Blake with her rifle right behind him. The hatch went up. "Oh man," Blake said. Hicks was speechless. At least 50 of the aliens lay sprawled on the ground around the ship. They looked melted, as if all their edges had run together. Dead, Hicks didn't doubt it for a second. That was pretty incredible. But what he saw, standing a dozen meters away, was even more incredible. "What the hell is that?" Blake said. Hicks just stared. Some kind of suited figure stood there.
Oh,
It was easily 7 or 8 meters tall, bipedal, with a helmet clear on the E-suit it wore. Hicks could see the thing's face behind the bubble covering, and it looked like nothing so much as an elephant might appear, were it to evolve into a two-legged animal. It had pinkish-gray skin, a ridged nose, or maybe a trunk that vanished, and a long chamber down the front of the suit, with what seemed to be a pair of small tentacles, one to the other side of the larger trunk. It had a short extension of the suit behind it, and Hicks guessed that it had a tail in the tube shaped like a skinny pyramid. A closer look and Hicks realized the thing wasn't exactly standing. The heavy boots it wore had a central split, as if the thing had hooves, and they didn't quite touch the ground. It was actually floating a couple of centimeters above the surface. The thing held a device in its gauntleted hands, and Hicks would bet 10 years' pay against a toenail clipping it was some kind of weapon. It was close enough so he could see its eyes. The pupils were shaped like crosses, wider than they were high. They looked dead, those eyes. They were eyes that Newt seemed to recognize. Unable to explain why, she knew who these beings were, where they had come from, and why they were here now. In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War, as depicted in the Aliens comic series and novels, and the events leading up to it, as well as its aftermath. The accounts are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. For all Earth War videos, check out the playlists on the end screen for past videos, and stay tuned for more. As always, I'd like to thank you very, very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very, very special thanks goes out to Weyland-Yutani Executive, M. Yorick, part of the Patreon Hive. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.
dude, most of these suck. Ooh. Oh, okay, this is really good.
Hicks and Newt shared a connection in the years after Acheron. They dreamed of the alien creatures that pursued them over a decade earlier. They were vivid, excruciating, and felt very real. Some were memories, half forgotten, altered. Newt dreamed of camping outside the colony, sharing stories of the monsters, and soon realizing how true the stories really were. She dreamed of being saved by Hicks, and Hicks dreamed of saving her, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. The common force of their dreams was the xenomorph, and it seemed to connect them. However, they were not the only ones dreaming of the creatures. Dr. Arona, in fact, had been studying reports of Newt's dreams from her evaluations at Fieldcrest Hospital. The descriptions had assisted in verifying footage taken from the doomed vessel junket and the subsequent coordinates to the alien homeworld. During the Benedict's mission to those coordinates back on Earth, Dr. Arona's attention had become focused on an alarming phenomena, further reports of dreams, all within a 50-click area. Case 233225, Maria Gonzalez. Case 232337, Thomas Culp. Case 232558, T.M. Duncan. Case 232745, C. Lockwood. All medical patients with descriptions of the alien that were virtually identical in their dreams, along with a dozen other similar reports. These reports left Dr. Arona and his staff very curious. Our data so far does not indicate that the aliens are particularly intelligent, per se, Dr. Arona reported. Some of the technicians on the psych side did a workup postulating different modes of communication for the alien creatures. The most plausible was telepathy, or at least some form of telepathy.
Telepathy?
The
Who
sightings
pronounces
are
it
random
telepathy?
and confined to a certain geographical area.
Telepathy. Telepathy. Telepathy.
Telepathy? What?
Area. Very odd. We've kept the existence of the alien creatures secret. All of a sudden, we are experiencing a wave of spontaneous telepathic events. The question is, why now? And why Earth? The most curious of all were the dreams of Captain James Lukowski, who had been contained by the Bionational Corporation and had been host to their alien specimen. Excerpts from interviews conducted during the time he was under observation suggested that Lukowski was sinking into a deranged state, and his dreams led to disturbing beliefs. Transcripts of these interviews are as follows. I'm blind, so scared, pain, can't see. Fly, fly away, my brave little captain. I remember that song. My mother used to sing it to me when I was small. Pain's going away. God, I feel warm now. I'm not scared anymore. I don't have to be. She's going to take care of me. It's so warm. I'm part of something new and better. I keep remembering my mother. You spend your whole life trying to forget the warmth of the womb, but the world's so empty, so cold. I see it so clearly now. I was hungering for the warmth again, for that almost preternatural togetherness. We pretend with our bodies, but it isn't the same. It can't be the same. Career, job, honor, country, all farce. What does it all mean? Reality is the vast loneliness of our solitary, cold existence. I'm blind, but I finally see. The darkness is a blanket. Something drips like sweat, all warm and sticky. It feels good. We were one. God, I loved you. Then I was torn from you, forced into this naked existence, so alone and cold, I never thought I'd feel that love again. My true mother is part of me. I can feel her sliding wet in my throat, filling my lungs, my stomach, wrapping her fingers inside so warm. Her teeth glitter like the stars. God, she is impossibly beautiful. She loves me more than you ever could. Dr. Arona had been closely monitoring the reports with great interest and began an investigation that ultimately led to a deranged preacher, broadcasting images that were unmistakably images of the xenomorph, claiming the creature to be the true Messiah. He urged his viewers and followers to prepare for its coming and to listen to the call in their dreams. In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War, as depicted in the Aliens comics and the events leading up to it, as well as its aftermath. The accounts are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. For more on the Earth War, check out the Accounts of the Earth War playlist on the end screen, and stay tuned for the latest videos in this series. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very, very special thanks goes out to Weyland-Yutani executive, M. Yorick, part of the Patreon Hive. Thanks, M. Yorick. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.
Cult of the Xenomorph.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And Jerry Mathers as the Beaver.
How many more wars will have to be fought? How many more earthquakes or tornadoes and floods will have to come before you make sure
that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
I have sinned against you, my Lord.
the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
My name is Peter Weyland. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to change the world.
Commercial television, as it was known in the 1980s and 90s, disappeared with the application of superconductive transmission technology to the then existent cable television systems. With systems offering 500, then 1,000, and eventually 5,000 channels, it became economically infeasible for advertisers to support mainstream dramatic programming. Soon, instead of hundreds of thousands of viewers, audiences' shares were calculated in the tens. With the dissolution of the FCC, cable access was open to all persuasions. In a resurgence similar to that seen in the mid-1980s, religious programming became a television staple, outnumbering non-doctrinal programs nearly 100 to 1. With so many programs to choose from, viewer perceptions changed. Much as the fast-cut visual styles of the 90s were defined by 5, then 10-second commercials, the style of the mid-century programming was changed with the introduction of the retinal switch, or eyeBox. The eyeBox was designed to detect minute changes in the capillaries of the retina, initiating random channel changes based on involuntary blood pressure fluctuations. To hold audiences, programmers were forced to devise new styles of programming that would not trip the eyeBox watcher. Such technology gave way to the rise of Salvahay, an independently wealthy preacher who used his millions to reach his followers, to whom he referred to as the Great Unwashed, with his message via the eyeBox. With the monstrous image of the xenomorph drawing in wider viewers and further followers, Salvahay broadcast his sermons. I know that which you lack. I know of your incompleteness. I have the answer. The true Messiah can make you into a holy receptacle, for it is in bearing the sons and daughters of the Messiah that you will find your salvation. Listen and know that I speak only the truth. False prophets and false gods have brought our world to the brink of ruination. False gods ask that you worship them from afar, but they remain cold and aloof and sterile. The true Messiah will join with you. You can feel the true Messiah, touch the true Messiah, become one with the true Messiah. Do not allow yourselves to be misled any longer, my brothers and sisters. Throw off the chains and shackles of your oppression. Get rid of the old and make room in yourself for the new. The true Messiah is coming, brothers and sisters. Soon the communion will be possible, and only those who open themselves to the ultimate experience will survive the coming devastation that man has brought upon himself. Prepare yourselves for the coming. Listen for the call in your dreams. Listen and heed. Salvaje, though well-financed, required assistance on the tech side of the broadcasts. He paid for the services of a technician, Pindar, later detained by the government, declared as a terrorist, and interrogated for information regarding an attack on bionational industries. Dr. Arona, in his investigation, was briefed by TIA agent Grona with accompanying security footage and recordings of Pindar's interrogation. He revealed the inner workings of the congregation, the constant threats on Salvaje's part, and his own initial belief that the hologram of this supposed Messiah was somehow a computer simulation. After the last time when Salvaje threatened me, I decided I had to find out more about what he was into, Pindar explained. So I did some checking and discovered that he had hired other technicians to help him. I knew one of them slightly, Gerard, a contract worker for the Bionational Lab in Lima. I took the shuttle to Lima, made it a point to accidentally bump into him, bought him a few drinks, and I learned that Salvaje had worked for Bionational before he started his crusade. He was some kind of low-level administrator. He didn't need the money, he came from a rich family, but obviously he needed something from Bionational. He up and quit one day, but kept in touch with some of the techs. Gerard didn't know why he quit, and he only did some hard wiring for him, set up a small computer system. Salvaje paid well. That was all that was important. Gerard didn't know anything else about it, but that was good enough. I knew Salvaje had his own system. His security was not as good as he thought. I got inside. I ran a download program and copied all his files. Took them home. He would never know I had been there. I found out where his Messiah came from when I ran an AV he had buried in a mathematical program. It was a bad induction copy of a Bionational top-secret AV for internal view only. He must have stolen it or had somebody steal it for him. Whoever had done it screwed it up. They lost part of the visual and all of the audio tracks, so there's no sound. Salvaje's Messiah wasn't a computer image, as I had thought. It was real. There were more images to see. This time the monster was larger, shaped slightly different, with a massive cranial plate that branched antler-like. It had an extra set of smaller arms coming in from its chest area. The creature was huge. There was a scale built into the edge of the hollow. The walls of the room were now covered with convoluted loops of shining black material, and the floor was dotted with garbage can-sized eggs. Dr. Arona studied the footage closely. "My God," he said. "It's a queen. One that doesn't need to be fertilized, apparently," the agent said. Arona shook his head. This could confirm my theory that a queen can develop from a drone as needed to continue the species. Some kind of hormonal change, perhaps. We've got to get it, and those eggs. I'll make some calls. We'll seize the Lima laboratory in the interests of Terran security. The agent shook his head. Too late for that. Arona blinked. What? What do you mean? Watch, the agent said. The security footage of the Bionational complex revealed the details of an attack. Outside the complex, a truck slammed into the gate. From the ruined cab of the vehicle, a single battered woman crawled out, managed to stand. She wore a robe. The security computer locked a wide-angle camera onto her. Her hands were empty, but she had something strapped to her chest. A blocky, circular device about the diameter of a dinner plate. One of the Bionational guards hit the panic button and the alarm klaxon started hooting. The other guard pulled his sidearm and ordered the woman to halt. As the guard raised his weapon to fire, the woman exploded. The image washed to white. "We ID'd the bomb as a 5-ton building demolition charge," Agent Grona said. "It took out the kiosk, the truck, and 26 meters of fence." A patrol robot provided the next segment of the recording. Arona watched, fascinated. The first bus reached the complex's entrance. 10 or 12 roped figures scrambled out and ran for the door. Arona regarded the bearded man, Salvaje. He didn't look like a fanatic, but then What exactly did a fanatic look like? Was he supposed to be drooling and foaming at the mouth? More robed people arrived. Arona estimated there must be at least 35 or 40 of them who had survived the attack. The image on the security footage cut to the view of the door. Danger, it said in 10-centimeter high letters. Biological experiment, authorized personnel only. A pair of dead guards lay on the floor. 5 robed figures sprawled near the guards inside the chamber. A translucent mist fogged around the ground, partially covering rows of eggs. The queen alien lumbered into view. She stared at the people, twisted her head to one side, then the other, as if puzzled. Salvaje faced her. He said something, but only a few words were audible. "We have come to consummate our love, to purge the vision from our minds, to be one with you." Some of the eggs began opening. The first one to open was in front of Salvaje. He stood with his arms wide, as did the others, but his eyes were open. He leaned down over the egg. Flaps glistened with strands of shining slime. Fingerbone-like legs emerged and caught the edges of the opened egg, pulling the primary embryo stage of the alien's crab-like body onto the lip. It leapt at Salvaje, wrapped a muscular tail around his neck, jammed its ovipositor into his startled mouth, and crushed his face with its legs, pressing itself flat against his face. Other eggs splayed wide for their fleshy openings. Other primary embryos leapt on waiting faces. The queen watched it all impassively. Then, when the humans had been infected, the outermost eggs hatched and depleted of their inhabitants. The remaining robed people darted in and dragged their comrades away, adroitly avoiding, save for one, being attacked by the remaining eggs. The queen did not approve of this, but she was anchored to her huge egg sac and could not move quickly enough to catch the scurrying humans. The security system was overridden at this time, Grona said. We have no more images of the fanatics. 90 seconds later, the security system destroyed itself, along with the entire complex. Blew it to bits. Dr. Arona rose from his seat. No. What about the alien? The eggs? Scattered about the countryside in pieces the size of your little fingernail, Doctor. Arona was stunned by the news. What a waste. He'd sent a ship halfway across the galaxy to obtain such specimens, and if they'd been a few hours quicker, they could have one right here, on Earth. That explained the dreams people had been having. What about the fanatics? Did any of them get away? There were at least a dozen of them infected. The agent sighed. We don't know. Our people have been combing the country looking for them, but there's no sign. The explosion was in half a megaton range. There's no way to tell from the wreckage how many people died in it, whether anybody got away. For a moment, hope flared in Arona's eyes. There might be a chance. We hope none of them did, the agent said. What? Are you crazy? These life forms are priceless. Think about it, Doctor. Arona was a brilliant man. He'd always been at the top of his class. It hit him, what the agent was trying to say. Yes, the aliens were priceless, but under controlled circumstances. Bionational knew that. That's why the complex was rigged to blow up if there came a breach in security. If the aliens somehow escaped, got free of captivity, that would be disastrous. Even a single egg was potentially dangerous, given how quickly they could breed and come to maturity, and given how they can change into queens if there was a need. Arona nodded. Yes, he saw it. A dozen queen aliens hiding out, laying eggs. That could be a problem. That could be a major problem. God help us all. In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War, as depicted in the Aliens comic series and the events leading up to it, as well as its aftermath. The accounts are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events have been altered over time. For all other videos on the Earth War, you can check out the accounts of the Earth War playlist on the end screen. Stay tuned for more in this series. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and if you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a like. You can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very, very special thanks, as always, goes out to Weyland-Yutani executive, Emioric, part of the Patreon Hive. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. You can follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @AlienTheoryYT on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off. From the very beginning of the Benedict's mission to the Xenomorph homeworld, Colonel Stevens had protested Hicks's involvement, believing him to be unstable and unreliable, while in reality he posed a major threat to his conspiracy with Massey. Stevens went so far as to formally complain to Dr. Arona, expressing his concerns about the shell-shocked Marine. He's been bucking for a psych discharge ever since he came back from Acheron, Stevens said. Command thinks Hicks is a big, tough monster killer. Crew killer is more like it. It's not like Acheron was a success. The only survivors were a kid, a civilian named Ripley, and Hicks. The kid's a brain case, and Ripley, well, you know what became of her. I don't need his kind of experience. Dr. Arona was, of course, dismissive of Stevens' protests, but it didn't prevent the Colonel from hindering any detail of the mission where Hicks attempted his own input. Being second in command, Hicks had to answer to Stevens. For example, knowing the threat they were about to face, Hicks ordered plasma rifles for the team and had them added to the ship's inventory, only to have Stevens overrule this decision after a heated debate. Blasters are notoriously unstable and grossly destructive, reflecting specimens, not pieces. Stevens' rationale, though he certainly didn't want such advanced firepower to get in the way of Massey's operation when the time was right. Hicks had no choice but to follow Stevens' command. What Stevens did not know was while he was preoccupied with removing plasma rifles from the inventory, Hicks was moving bomb components past him, disguised as spare parts. After the skirmish, Hicks had informed his fellow survivors of these circumstances. I can put a ring of fire down there that'll trigger 1,000 volcanoes. Between them and the nukes, they'll scour the place like a sandblaster, sterilize the whole fucking planet. With Stevens and Massey now dead, though the mission had come to grief and many combat androids had been slaughtered, Hicks's true agenda, to nuke the site from orbit, was now free to pursue. But there was still the matter of their new friends, these mysterious alien creatures with advanced weaponry of their own, who had seemingly saved the group from an oncoming horde of xenomorphs attacking the APC. What exactly did they want? Newt seemed to have an idea. She screamed, and Hicks was there, holding her by the shoulders, shaking her gently. Hey, it's all right, we're okay. The memories bubbled in her, and she fought them. But there was a pressure in her brain, a kind of malevolent presence. It's that thing out there, she said. I can read its thoughts. More like its feelings. It's inside my head. Hicks glanced at Blake. I'm not crazy, Newt said. It just killed all the aliens outside our ship, right? Because it hates them. It's kind. I've been here before, collecting specimens. She shook her head, as if that would clear the intrusion by the stranger. It somehow can feel my thoughts, too, she said. It knows. Knows what? On Acheron. My parents. What about them? Oh God, Hicks. My parents found a ship there. An alien ship. The pilot was some kind of scientist, maybe. It had been to this world. It had taken specimens of these things. Eggs. It must have been infected, implanted. They killed it. The ship crashed on Acheron. The things survived inside it. I don't know for how long. My parents found it. They went into the ship. Newt sobbed. Tears flowed. That was one of the memories she had buried the deepest. Not even the worst of her nightmares had dredged it up before now. Hate filled her brain, but it was not her own emotion. It was from the space traveler floating outside the APC, the giant whose fellow being had died and crashed into Acheron. She didn't want to remember, but the space traveler pulled at it, drawing it into view, watching her father lean over one of the eggs, seeing all over again the opening in the crab-like embryo that flew out and latched onto her father's face, seeing her mother and listening to the screams. No, get out of me. Go away. Hate. Gut-churning, black, molten hate, sloshing over and filling Newt to her toes. How this thing hated these creatures. It saved us, Hicks said. Not because it likes us, she said, because it can't stand them. Blake said, Sarge, we've got to get the ship spaceworthy. We've got what, 3 hours? Newt thought about the bombs that would drop. What would happen to the planet when they did? She felt a sudden interest from the spacesuited figure. It understood her thoughts well enough to hear that message. The thing is leaving, the crewman said, just floating away. It knows about the bombs, Newt said. Yeah, well, while I'd like to be an ambassador to a new species and all, we have to get to the APC and have it fixed, or we're going to be atomic dust ourselves. Hicks stood, leaving Newt sitting on the deck of the little craft. Next to her, Mitch opened his eyes. He didn't speak, and Newt had nothing she wanted to say to him. The alien presence left her suddenly. It brought on a sharp sensation, as if a knife were pulled from her brain. It was hard to breathe. Their eyes burned and their noses ached and dripped, but the repairs took only an hour. The APC lifted, made orbit, and managed a safe rendezvous with the Benedict. Hicks made very certain there were no unwanted passengers on the APC before he pulled into the bay, and even then he had the cleaning lasers scorch every bit of the landing craft's exterior before he let them leave the docking area. Newt sat at a table, staring at the wall. It was all over. They had come to the aliens' world. They had survived pirates and attacks by the creatures. They were about to smash the planet back to a pre-life stage. They were going home. It was all over. And she didn't give a damn. In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War, as depicted in the Aliens comic series, and the events leading up to it, as well as its aftermath. The events are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. For more on the Earth War, you can check out the Accounts of the Earth War playlist on the end screen and on the channel, and stay tuned for the latest videos in the series. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very special thanks goes out to Weyland-Yutani Executive, M. Yorick, part of the Patreon Hive. I'd also like to thank our Hive's queens, Lady Anne and Kamathi Thomas. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. You can follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off. After a deranged cult compromised Bionational's labs, leading to the escape of its alien specimens, the time for private interests in the possibilities of the xenomorph had passed. The Earth government and Bionational Industries arranged an emergency meeting to confer regarding the severity of the situation. Present at this meeting was Dr. Arona, representing the Earth government, and Dr. Driner, representing Bionational, as well as 2 unidentified parties. Transcripts of this meeting outline Dr. Arona's assessment of the events unfolding and plans to prevent an outbreak on Earth. Arona: all right, gentlemen, let's not do an elaborate mating dance all around it. We all know why we're here. Driner: perhaps we should reconsider having attorneys present. Arona: nobody's talking about prosecution. Let's not insult each other's intelligence. I'm government and you're private. My hammer is bigger, and I'd play hell whacking you with it. We all know that too. At least right now, anyway. So let's skip the scat and get to the bottom line. You had one of the aliens tucked away down in your essay lab, and some religious fanatics broke in and got themselves impregnated by the thing's embryos. We all know that. Your specimen got cooked in the explosion that destroyed the lab. The fanatics got away. We know that because we are still getting reports of the nightmares, so some of the damn things are still alive. Am I telling you anything you don't know? Drina, we, are aware of this. Arona, I thought you might be. Gotta tap into our mainframe, but you don't have a line tied to our attack unit. Well, we found one of the attackers. Driner, with the implanted embryo? Arona, unfortunately no. This man's chest had been burst from the inside. He'd been dead for half a day when our team uncovered him in New Chicago. There was no sign of the newborn alien. Driner. Shit. Arona. I share your sentiments, Doctor. We would very much like to collect these things ourselves, but I'm afraid our worry is now larger than simply who will be the first to get a potential weapon system, no matter how valuable that might be. Driner. What do you mean? Arona. Doctor, you understand how these things reproduce. Each one is a potential queen, is it not? Driner. Yes, that is possible. Arona. We don't know how many of the fanatics escaped. Could be as many as a dozen. We've lost one of the newborn aliens. The others will be hatching from their human eggs shortly, if they haven't already done so. Is that not correct? Driner. Well, it would depend on which eggs delivered their implants. The Queen laid them over several days. Arona. But at the most, several days plus or minus is all, correct? Driner. I'm afraid so. Arona. Doctor, if there were, say, 5 of them implanted, and each of them produces a queen, and they all begin to lay eggs as soon as they reach maturity, how long do you think it might take before the damn things are swarming all over the place? Driner. There's no way to be certain, that is to say. Arona. It's rather like the hamster problem. If one mother and her litters all come to term and keep mating and having more babies who all survive, in a couple of years we're knee-deep in hamsters. Of course, that doesn't happen. Some are killed by the mothers, some are eaten by natural predators, some get stepped on by things with big feet. But these aliens don't have any natural predators on this world. It takes armor-piercing, military-grade weaponry to kill one, and even then it isn't easy. We have the reports from our Colonial Marines' encounters with them. A Chinese farmer with a pitchfork, an Australian bird hunter with a shotgun. They'll be wasting their time trying to stop a full-grown alien with either of those weapons, correct? Arona. In fact, just about anybody who comes against one of these things is going to regret it. They reproduce like hamsters, the queens don't even need mates, they come of age real fast. We don't know where they will start to pop up. The fanatics have spread out. We've gotten reports of them all over the globe. Some have to be discounted, of course, but if 1/10 of the material is correct, we're going to start seeing these things making themselves known in both hemispheres from the equator to the poles. Chicago is a long way from Lima. And gentlemen, that means we will all be in very deep shit. I expect your cooperation in every way to stop that, because if we don't stop it, making that big end of the year bonus is going to be the last thing you'll have to worry about. These things will be killing so many people that you'll hear survivors' outraged screams on Mars, and every one of them will be calling for heads to roll. I'll give them yours, then the government will give them mine. Arona and, in turn, the government had the cooperation of Bionational after this meeting, united in a common goal to see that disaster would be prevented. Arona was calm, cool, and collected as he shared his concerns, though his gravest concern was that at this juncture, it may have already been too late. He didn't express his own worst fear, that the things would get well established enough so that the very survival of mankind on the planet would be in jeopardy. Of course, that was the worst-case scenario. He didn't really think that would happen. It was just a nightmarish worry. He hoped. In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War, as depicted in the Aliens comic series, and the events leading up to it as well as its aftermath. The accounts are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. For more on the Earth War, you can check out the Accounts of the Earth War playlist on the end screen, and stay tuned for the latest videos. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from Alien Theory. A very, very special thanks goes out to Weyland-Yutani executive, Amuric, part of the Patreon Hive. I'd also like to thank our Hive's queens, Lady Anne and Kamathi Thomas. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.
Thank you, Officer Ripley. That'll be all.
Please, you're not listening to me. Kane. Kane, who went into that ship, said he saw thousands of eggs there. Thousands.
Thank you. That will be all.
God damn it, that's not all. Because if one of those things gets down here, then that will be all. And all this bullshit that you think is so important, you can just kiss all that goodbye.
The Earth government had been quick to act in the mission to eliminate xenomorph specimens and prevent further outbreak on the planet. The first infestation seemed easy enough to deal with. Rona's TAC teams were primed for sudden mass disappearances. Whenever an area started missing people, they went in. He mobilized transportation so that a fully equipped team could launch and parabola down to any spot on the globe in under 3 hours. The first nests were small, no more than 50 or 100 eggs and a single queen. The TAC teams took no chances. They sterilized the area. The nests were razed, surrounding areas destroyed, suspected carriers picked up and detained. Those with implants were killed quickly and their bodies burned. New Chicago, Lesser Miami, Havana, Madrid, those nests were quickly discovered and eliminated. At first, Arona felt a certain smugness. True, there would be a lot of damages to cover and a certain amount of political heat to be endured, but the Planetary Security Act gave him a great deal of latitude. The things weren't very bright. They were like termites or ants or bees. They built their nests and set up egg chambers and sent workers out to gather food. The behavior was instinctive. There was no greater intelligence behind it. It had apparently worked for the things on their homeworld, but they didn't have such clever competition. For a time, Arona rested easier. He was the expert, and the military trusted him implicitly. Weeks went by, months. More nests were kicked open. Paris, Moscow, Brisbane, Antarctic City. The things had spread far and wide as he had feared, but they were still easy enough to find and destroy. The infection was bad, but controlled. If the staff point lanced and cleaned, it would heal. But then things began to change. The TAC teams were getting good at their job, practice making them better, and maybe they started to get sloppy. Or maybe it was some kind of forced natural selection, like rats or roaches who have been hunted and poisoned or smashed flat. The aliens began to vary in their nest making. The hives got smaller and more numerous. The TAC teams would only find 10 or 15 eggs in a tiny chamber, and such places were harder to locate. And there were more of them. An area of greater North Africa and the old Ivory Coast yielded no fewer than 80 small nests inside a 50-kilometer circle. Some of the hives were inhabited, basements of skyscrapers, old warehouses, but some of them were in the surrounding countryside, under the ground. TAC squads discovered implanted cattle, horses, and even goats in some chambers. Anything large enough seemed to work. And while people in civilized countries who went missing were usually reported, a farmer and a few dozen cattle in some rural area might not be noticed. It was as though the aliens were becoming smarter as a survival characteristic. 6 months after the escape from the labs in Lima, Arona had to order a division-sized attack on a giant nest in Diego Suarez on the northern tip of Madagascar. It was actually a series of several hundred smaller nests that had been tunneled and joined together. 8 months into the war, Arona was responsible for the nuclear destruction of Jakarta. A year after the war began, the continent of Australia was considered too infested to allow any travel to or from, and a full quarantine was instigated. Any ship, air vessel, or spacecraft trying to leave was shot down by Coast Guard laser satellites. It was no longer a matter of TAC units seeking alien hives to destroy. It was a matter of establishing perimeters and checking to make certain no carriers crossed into safe territories. It was truly war. Martial law was declared. All national boundaries were suspended. The military alliance came into being, and civil liberties were put aside for the duration of the conflict. Suspected carriers of alien embryos could be legally shot by the command of any military officer above the rank of colonel. Then it dropped to majors and captains, sergeants. Pretty soon, any soldier with a gun could shoot anybody he damn well wanted to. If the scan came up negative later, well, too fucking bad. War was hell, wasn't it? A few civilians here and there to save the planet? Yes, of course. Alien drones that were captured, a rare event, seemed to have gotten a little brighter. The smartest could barely keep up with an average dog insofar as intelligence was concerned. But the single queen captured in a battle that destroyed half of San Francisco's downtown district tested out to nearly 175 on the Erwin Schattler scale. It made it smarter than most of the humans ever born. The nightmares had come true. Whatever Arona had felt before was nothing compared to the sinking, twisted coldness in his gut when that little bit of information arrived in his computer. They were getting smarter. Too smart. And humans were responsible for it. It was war, and men were losing. Arona marveled at this, that it should come to be this way. Man had the superior technology. It was man's world. Man had the advantages. Except that the aliens had a stronger drive to live. They would sacrifice all for that, for the survival of the species. Only a few rare men were willing to do that. A mother would die to protect her children, a saint would walk into the fire for his fellow men or his god, but the instinct of self-preservation was too strong in most humans. The aliens didn't care. If 100 drones had to die to save one egg, they would, and did. The things sprang up everywhere, in places where a rat would have trouble living, in spots where no one would have guessed they could spawn. Buried in the Arctic ice floes, in deserts, in the tame jungles, on barges, anywhere there was room for a nest. Nobody knew how many of the things there were. There were only guesses. The estimates ranged from hundreds of thousands to tens of millions. Private ships left Earth in droves, so many the military couldn't stop or even inspect them all. Most only fled as far as Luna or Belt. Some could reach the far planets of the system. Few wealthy souls banded together and bought a private starship before the government clamped down and made such ownership illegal. Thousands ran, because on Earth, there are few places to hide. Arona was in one of those places, a heavily guarded military complex in Mexico. The perimeter was rigged with force fences, the ground mined, every car or air carrier that entered or left scanned, every passenger FLIR-reviewed for parasites. It was as safe as anywhere left. In the end, Arona finally realized that the aliens were like a disease, not an enemy army. The only way to save the patient was to cut off the cancerous parts and sterilize the wounds, and it was too late for that. It had all happened so fast, nobody could have predicted it would erupt so quickly. A year and a half ago, men were supreme on their homeworld, top of the food chain, the king predator. But now, the military minds were not brilliant. They never were, but those in charge were smart enough to know they were losing. All remaining starships were confiscated. Hastily laid plans began to be implemented. There would be a regrouping of key military personnel to the outer colonies, there to develop new plans for combating the aliens. Sitting in his information center, a cool and clean place of technological miracles of communication, Arona laughed. The Earth was being abandoned. He wouldn't be leaving with them. Oh, he could have gone, but what would be the point? He would survive, but he would have lost the most important battle of his life. It was an ancient custom that sailors had once observed. If the ship sank, the captain went down with it. The aliens had been his project, his work. Someone had spilled a retort of crucial fluid and the lab had been contaminated. It was his responsibility. He should have foreseen it. Even if everyone else forgot, he never would. He was going to stay there, win or lose. During this time of chaos and desperation, Hicks and Newt remained on the Benedict in hypersleep for the trip home, unaware there was no longer a home to go back to.
Oh, that's it.
In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War as depicted in the Aliens comic series and the events leading up to it, as well as its aftermath. The events are explored as originally published, despite certain names, locations, and other events having been altered over time. For more on the Earth War, you can check out the accounts of the Earth War playlist on the end screen, and stay tuned for the latest videos. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very, very special thanks goes out to our Weyland-Yutani executive of the Patreon Hive, Emuric. I'd also like to thank our Hive's queen, Lady Anne. And if you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, you can check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, be sure to catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off. In his final days, Dr. Arona kept shelter in a military complex in Mexico, compiling as much data on the enemy as possible, and watching the Earth fall to the xenomorph infestation before his eyes, watching helplessly on his computer screen. Shortly before the complex was compromised, Arona sent a final transmission, reporting his last significant findings. Eyes only, AA Alpha, log on, Arona. I've lost track of time since the binational attack. I've barricaded myself in my office to give me time to prepare this final report. Evidently, the alien queen is able to communicate in some subconscious fashion with other species and human beings. These disseminations manifest themselves in the form of patterned nightmares. The dreams were a lure. At first we thought we'd be able to contain the spore. Infestation seemed limited to a narrow geographic range, and yet every cluster we found, there were 10 more just like it. The aliens' subconscious bait transcended class and political boundaries. We found hives everywhere. With each new discovery, our hope of destroying the creatures before they entered civilian population faded. However, we still considered containing an option. In studying the bionational files, we learned their queen had gestated a number of weeks prior to maturation. Using their experiment as a baseline, I assumed we still had time before any new queens would become viable. I was wrong. Perhaps our worst mistake was underestimating the sheer instinctual cunning of the creatures. We didn't see the underlying pattern behind their evolutionary process, the way every facet of their existence was geared toward propagation. The queens matured at whatever speed their survival dictated. I assumed the gestation period was time for the alien embryo to feed and grow, but it was more than that. It was an opportunity for the unknowing host to spread its spore to other sites. There was a geometric perfection to the infestations. Each queen would lay still more queens, and with every generation the spore more entrenched. The civilian authority was weak in the face of the devastation. When the generals finally staged their coup, it seemed almost welcome. The military created testing centers where physicians checked civilians for signs of alien infection. First, the tests were voluntary. Within days, that changed. There were rumors that the military was using the pretext of alien infection to eliminate political dissidents, the poor, the disaffected, as if such rivalries even mattered. Vital services, water, electricity, began to fail. We've heard of infestations in Europe, Australia. The seed is growing with remarkable speed. From all this, I've come to understand something about humanity. Man is an animal, driven by animal passions. Civilization is a pathetic charade of manners predicated on a tissue-thin veil of lies. In the future, if there is a future, historians may blame our failures on some external cause. The aliens, bionational, fate. I know the truth. Those things didn't destroy us. We did. They'll be here soon. The military has organized off-world ships to evacuate vital personnel to the other colonies, mainly their own precious hides. I've chosen to remain behind. We made the mistake of perceiving the aliens as sentient warriors. I finally realized the truth. They're a disease. A cancer. My mother died of cancer. Odd how I've been thinking about her. Years ago, following surgery, doctors would apply radiation to the affected area in hope of destroying all traces of the source. It sounds so primitive, but there are times when the old ways are the most effective. I've timed the detonation to coincide with the military's escape. They think they can destroy the creatures. They think someday they'll be able to come back to their world. There's something pathetic about this struggle. My only regret is that I won't survive to see them proven wrong. I take pride in my pragmatism. I realize this transmission is pointless. I doubt if the long-range relay stations are even operational. Still, if anyone is actually seeing this, doesn't really matter, does it? I've never actually fired one of these. I feel rather foolish. In this series, I'm recounting the Earth War as depicted in the Aliens comic series and novel.
Pipeline successfully connected to pump jack.
Okay, dude.
You! Yes!
Milestone completed. Done.
Alright, that's it for today.